Three, two, one. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. This is week 57 of the quarantine. Numbers might be off, but whatever.
Numbers don't
Round up,
matter
round
anymore.
down. Yeah, exactly. I just ordered a $700 order from Costco. We are stocked up on food and supplies. We are going to eat good for the next week.
We are closing on a house tomorrow. Not tomorrow. It was supposed to be tomorrow, but we delayed it because of the quarantine. It's going to be sometime next week, and then we'll see how and when we're actually going to be able to move there. By the way, if anybody has like a good like experiences with like mattresses, like really nice mattresses, we're looking to buy a really nice mattress. We're looking to buy two really nice things for this entire house. One is a really nice king size mattress, and the other is a really nice sofa. That's the extent of our new home purchases. So if anyone has any suggestions,
it depends on how many bells and whistles you want with your mattresses, right? It's like, do you want your mattresses to be
all the bells and whistles?
Okay, then get one of those ones. I forgot the company name, but they advertise it with like temperature control and also like height control on each individual
sleep
side.
number.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm pushing for that, but that may just be because they're advertising at me a lot.
And it always works on you, man.
Exactly. So I'm trying to have people like, does anyone have any like, I don't know, just leave comments, shoot me stuff on Twitter or whatever. I'm not gonna make the purchase for like at least another week, but I want to make sure I'm not like walking into like a really expensive trap here. All right. Okay. So that's the setup of the world. In terms of the arena, we are now at, since we last looked at Demon Hunters, when Demon Hunter win rates was going down, Demon Hunter win rates have gone back up. So we're now at 52.2%. It was as high as like 55.6, I think. So they didn't do anything. It's just the win rates have been fluctuating a little. And as we can see, Demon Hunters are still number one in this meta. Despite the nerfs, despite the micro adjust down, they are still definitely clearly the number one class. Priest is 52.7%, so Priest is also really, really good. But we're going to focus this episode's discussion on the Demon Hunter, because I have had the luxury of being offered 8 Demon Hunters in a row.
You played a ton.
And counting. Yeah. Just always rolled a Demon Hunter every time, and I've always picked it. And so I'm averaging like 9 wins per run with Demon Hunter through like good and bad decks. So I have a pretty good, I feel like I have a pretty good understanding now of like how Demon Hunter works and what Demon Hunters are vulnerable to. Now, the bright side is that Demon Hunters do have significant vulnerabilities that can be exploited. The downside is your actual ability to exploit those vulnerabilities probably have a lot more to do with RNG than with what you're actually doing. Or like with how your deck is built, right? So once you actually get into the game, it's a little questionable whether you can do anything about it. But so let's talk Demon Hunters. Let's talk about cards first. Okay, so I'm going to look at this not from the perspective of a Demon Hunter. I feel like it's pretty straightforward to play Demon Hunter. You can't mess up too hard. Like, if you can use your hero power to do something, like, do it. If you're about to die, don't use your hero power to do stuff. And
crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Other than that, just play for tempo. Don't play into giant board clears. And you have a Demon Hunter. It's like really not a hard class to play. But facing against the Demon Hunter, including Demon Hunter v Demon Hunter matchups, that takes some more thought to it. Before starting my Demon Hunter craze of 8 in a row, I was offered no Demon Hunter, one Demon Hunter in the 12 runs before that. So I had figured out a strategy in which I ended up with a 100% win rate against Demon Hunters in my last 2 runs before playing as Demon Hunter. and this was in the pre-nerf meta too. So it's also entirely possible to take down demon hunters, and we'll share some of those strategies with you today. Okay, so first off, demon hunter cards. Demon hunter cards can be overpowered. Some of them you can't play around. Like you can't play around Twin Slice. And the tier list was updated. Like huge update. We do this maybe twice a year. It's been getting less and less frequent, mostly because we've been just hitting the nail on the head. Most metas, like the algorithms, just like hit the entire meta on the head and didn't need an adjustment. But the last time we did this, I think, was a year ago after Rise of Shadows, or maybe like right before Saviors of Oldham, where we adjusted like the entire tier list. Every single card moved at least a point. And yeah, it's because some of the fundamental assumptions that we've been using for how the arena works was changed because of the Year of the Dragon / Year of the Phoenix standard thing that's happening. And so one of the things you may notice is that like Twin Tyrant is a 161 now, and it's like definitively number one, whereas before it was like number one-ish with other cards. Like now it's really put some distance between it and Rap Golem, just as an example. And generally stuff with more card advantage is treated a bit better, whereas one drops went down somewhat, by like 5 points maybe, so it's not the end of the world. But your Guardian Og Merchant was a 131, now it's a 121, so some of these got hit disproportionately like hard. But overall it reflects what the meta's doing right now, which is because of all the swings, like your curves are less important. Your ability, like your smaller swings that you may have gotten for like 1 mana used to matter a lot for the tempo. Now it just matters a lot less. Whereas just having more big stuff later just matters a lot more. So you can check out like all the changes on our changelog, but that's basically the general gist of what's changed. So some of the scores you see me mention may be like a little bit different, but yeah, Twin Slice, for example, went up from like a 130 something to a 157. So even though normally tempo stuff went down, the ability to control like the board like went up. So Twin Slice definitely went up, and you can't play around it was my original point. So yes, it's 157. It's one of the best demon hunter cards, but you can't play around it. So we're not gonna talk too much about it. But the cards that you can play around probably starts around like turn 5. Like one of the other cards that you can sort of play around is Nether Walker, which is a 2-drop. Its offering rates have been heavily nerfed. I think every like 3rd or 4th demon hunter I see has one of these now, whereas you used to get 2 of these per run. And it's the 2 mana 2/2 discover a demon. You can play around that, and that after they discover a demon, if they had played it already earlier on, you should know the targets. Like you should know what demons you're really afraid of, also known as Priestess of Fury, Hulking Overfiend, Gladebound of Death, and you should track that card because there's only a few like legitimate options to like that you should be afraid of from there. But other than that, the cards that you're playing around are starting at 5 mana, Chaos Nova, Gladebound of Death, which is getting nerfed again to 5 mana 6/4 instead of 7/4, coming in a patch early next week. Command the Illidari. Yes, you can play around this card. Then moving on to 7 mana Priestess of Fury, and 8 mana Hulking Overfiend and Coilfang Warlord. So those are the key demon hunter cards that you can play around. And there's another card that you can play around, which is Immolation Arrow later on. That's 2 mana, deal 1 damage to all minions twice. So
Aura.
Oh yeah, Immolation Aura.
You actually have to say the correct name.
I very consistently say Arrow.
Yeah. But you will actually confuse people because people are going to be searching up Immolation Arrow. It's Aura.
Okay, so Immolation Aura, which has 3 animations on the screen, but only deals 1 damage to all minions twice. It's extremely confusing. So, okay. Those are the cards you're playing around. And when I say those are the cards that you're playing around, I don't mean that there is any way for you to play around these cards. This is not like Flame Strike. You are very rarely going to be in a position where you're like, oh, it's about to be turn 7, let's not get destroyed by a Flame Strike. Here, because they're so diverse and it's Demon Hunter, they can deal exact damage, you shouldn't go into any particular turn, with the exception of Coilfang Warlord, just because it's easy to avoid. But most of these, you'll just have to be like on your toes reactively. Meaning, oh, it's turn 5 now. That would have been a perfect Chaos Nova. He didn't play a Chaos Nova. That means he doesn't have a Chaos Nova. Same with Command of the Illidari. I hear a lot of people worried about Command of the Illidari. It's a card that's still very frequently offered in the arena and very frequently picked. It's rated a 156 on our tier list. It's insanely good. It splits 6 possible damage diversely into whatever targets that like they want to hit. So it's extremely flexible, extremely good. And most people just think, oh, I can't play around it. But that's not true. In that you know you're not going to get screwed by Command of the Illidari if at any earlier turn, 5 and after, your opponent could have used Command of the Illidari to totally screw you and did not. Like, that's a read, right? This isn't super fancy Demon Hunter stuff. This is what you should be always doing. Except, with Demon Hunters in particular, there are more cards that totally screw you over. And being able to play confidently into the cards that really screw you over when you know your opponents don't have them is really the only way to beat them. Because if you don't do that, if you play scared the entire time, the Demon Hunter is going to overrun you, unless you have a deck that's built, like most priests are, to like just purely withstand Demon Hunters and like wait them out. For most decks, you're waiting out the Demon Hunter to a particular point, but you need to be a little aggressive on the board at some point, or else the Demon Hunter is still going to swing on you and get those hits to your face and end the game. And so, knowing what cards you don't have to play around allows you to set up in a way that the Demon Hunter can't swing against you as effectively. So yeah. So those are the cards, and that's the same thing with any of these, right? Like Gravebound of Death deals 4 damage. Demon Hunters can't really deal 4 damage, or I guess 4 or 5 damage, any other way. Their closest one is Warglaves of Azzinoth, and if you have a read that your opponent doesn't have a Gravebound Adept and doesn't have a Warglaves of Azzinoth, which is an epic card, and you really rarely see that nowadays, that's a great read, right? You don't have to worry about that anymore. You can start playing bigger stuff. Because if you have that 4 damage, if you're past that 4 damage mark, and you know that your opponent cannot deal 4 damage efficiently to one of your minions, and you know that because your opponent is a Demon Hunter, they don't have like hard removals anyway, then you're good. Then you just play big stuff. And when you play big stuff, the Demon Hunter can't do anything about that. At least not efficiently. And that becomes the rock that you hinge your entire strategy on. Similarly, if you have a lot of like small stuff and they live for a turn, you're like, well, they don't have Chaos Nova, they don't have Immolation Arrow, Aura, and they don't have Command of the Illidari. That's so much information. Now you can continue to just do small stuff. And you really, really have to take advantage of that and play into. They also probably don't have a Priestess of Fury, also, in that case. You really, really just have to play into it once you have a read. Because if you don't play into it, you're giving up ground to the Demon Hunter. And if you're giving up ground to the Demon Hunter can push really, really well. And then that'll really put you in a bad position. So, I don't know. When I see other people play Demon Hunter, I think I play against Demon Hunters. I think a lot of the times they play like a little too scared. And then some other times I think they don't play scared enough, in that if you already super control the board, like, don't play into the Chaos Nova more. Like, know how much the Demon Hunter can swing the board by. It's a set amount. Like, Demon Hunters they have to, Blizzard's key phrase for, like, what Demon Hunters have to do is they have to, quote-unquote, honestly remove all of your minions by dealing the damage to it. Now, the way they get that damage is not honest, but it does mean that the Demon Hunter doesn't have, like, extreme swings. They have just big swings that are set in the exact amount that they can swing. Like, Demon Hunters don't have a card like what's that 10 mana mage card? Puzzle Box, right? Like, Demon Hunters don't have Puzzle Box. It's not gonna happen. They don't have like your Skull of Gul'dan may be a ridiculously overpowered card, but what it's not is Ultimate Infestation. Like, those aren't Demon Hunter cards. They're still limited as a class in certain ways. So you need to be able to withstand the large swings, which means you need to be able to take advantage of your reads. And you can actually feel very safe that you're not going to get the even larger swings that are part of this meta now. So yeah, that's the class cards for Demon Hunters. Oh, Coilfang Warlord, the special mention on turn 8. Demon Hunters have no large removals except Coilfang Warlord, so when turn 8 comes, like, don't just have a target for this guy. Unless you have an answer. Like, sometimes I have a decent target for Coilfang Warlord, but I know it's because I'm so far ahead on the board, or like I have a Shadow Word Death. Like, if I have a Shadow Word Death, I don't really care if Coilfang Warlord, if my opponent spends 8 mana removing one of my, bigger minions. I want to get that out of the way. And also know that if your opponents have any of these cards, they're going to get value out of them. They're just like insanely overpowered cards. So when a Chaos Nova destroys 3 of my minions, I'm not like, oh no. I'm like, okay, good. Now he has 1 less Chaos Nova. Let's move on. When Coilfang Warlord takes out like 2 or 3 of my minions, I'm like, alright, he spent 8 mana, played a card, removed 2 or 3 of my minions. That's a good result. I just have to not be dead. Right? And part of the not be dead formula is also always hold back a removal, which at this stage you should just always do. This meta is slow enough that there's no reason to be out of removals from your hand. You should always have initiative from your hand. And in the case of Demon Hunters, you should always be able to remove a Priestess of Fury from your hand and what is reasonable for you to have left over on the board. Like, there's just no reason not to have that. All classes have enough initiative to do that. And like, if you're just really fighting for the board and you're going to use up all your initiative to do that, like, consider what happens when the Demon Hunter swings back. If it's earlier in the game, like if it's like turns 6, 7, 8 rather than turns 12, 13, 14. If you're using all your resources on turns 6, 7, 8 against the Demon Hunter, Demon Hunter's they have more resources, right? Like, if you're using up all your initiative then and you have nothing to back you up except top decks, then be aware of that. Be aware that very likely the Demon Hunter is going to swing the board back at you and you will have nothing except top decks, and you gotta hope. Sometimes that's the right answer if you're that desperate, but most of the times you can just let the Demon Hunter have the board a little there, right? Maybe they'll use some of their resources less efficiently in pursuit of the board. Maybe you have a way to flip the board back later on. Like, knowing how much the Demon Hunter can expand on the board and can flip the game is really, really important in facing down the Demon Hunter. Because like I said, they have really powerful cards, but they're like limited in swing. They're high swing, not insane swing. And these days, especially in Year of the Dragon, there are plenty of insane swing cards in the game. That high swing is actually not the worst type of swing.
Yeah, I think you just have to get used to the fact that 2-for-1s and 3-for-1s are just a part of the game now. Yeah. Like, you shouldn't really worry about 2-for-1s are just what you should expect, sort of like every single turn. And then 3-for-1s, you definitely expect that to happen a couple of times per game. You just want to make sure you hit back with your 3-for-1s more often. This is not like before, in which whoever gets a single 3-for-1 trade kind of wins the game. Now, like 3-for-1 trades, what does that mean? That's literally just a Twin Tyrant.
Yeah.
Well, quite a few of them can be played every single game. So it's really just prepare to minimize the amount of 3-for-1s that your opponent can hit on you. Try to maximize the number that you can hit on your opponent, and throughout the numerous 3-for-1 instances in the game, maximize yours and you will come out on top. That's how it is. It's no longer in previous metas in which the first person who gets a 3-for-1 just automatically wins, because that's too much. No, definitely not. It's like whoever wins the 3-for-1 wars within every single game wins the game.
Yeah. Anything else to say about this? The next, the hero power. Okay. So the way to play around the hero power, one, what the hero power means, and you should know, is that you will never get a good trade on the board. The Demon Hunter will always be getting back onto the board slowly but surely. Whereas if you were facing a mage, for example, and a 2-1 is on the board, the mage can like even out the card advantage. I mean, gain the card advantage, like not spend a card advantage to remove your 2-1 and even out the tempo. Even at a 3-1, it's about even tempo. With Demon Hunter, anything above a 1-1, the Demon Hunter gains. So if you make a good trade and you end up with a 3-1 or a 4-1 on the board, the Demon Hunter gains tempo the next turn. Like, it may seem really good to you that you got a good trade, but you didn't. You did nothing. All you've done is dealt a little extra face damage to your opponent. So know the times in which you're going to have something with 1 health on the board so that you can play another card with 1 health on the board. Like, those are the times to play your 2-1s, for example. Like, when after you get a good trade, if possible. Otherwise, just think of every time you get a whatever 1 as dealing that amount of damage to your opponent's face. Which brings me to my second point of dealing with the hero power is the only limit on that hero power is, like all other Demon Hunter resources, it runs out. You get to a certain point, and the Demon Hunter gets a little worried, and the Demon Hunter gets a little desperate. So once the Demon Hunter uses his hero power like a certain amount of times in ways that you are not going to be able to really control, they're out. They can't use their face anymore. And that's a large number of times. It gives Demon Hunters an insane advantage. It is definitely the best hero power in the entire game. But it does run out. And you can make it run out even harder if you hit your opponent to the face. So think about the logic behind, let's say you have a 4-4. Let's say you have a 5-5. And you're considering whether to hit your opponent's 3-2 or go face. Right? In against a normal class, what you're mostly thinking is, well, maybe my opponent can buff the 3-2 by 2 attack, maybe in conjunction with a hero power, maybe not, and then remove my 5-5 efficiently. Or maybe my opponent can do something that just deals 5 damage, and that removes my 5-5 more efficiently and saves its 3-2 if I go face. That's the punishment. The punishment for going face is efficient removal of the 5-5, or it's buffing the 3-2 to create the efficient removal of the 5-5. Demon Hunters cannot buff stuff. So, out of the question. Demon Hunters also can't deal more than 4 damage, unless it's a Qualifying Warlord, or a Hulking Overfeed. So, again, once you get a read for these cards, you can very confidently look at your 5-5, and your opponent has a 3-2, and regardless of how much health he has, as long as you're not in danger of dying if that 3-2 goes to your face the next turn, you just go face. Because the way the Demon Hunter can remove your 5-5 efficiently will almost always involve the Demon Hunter's face. And then the Demon Hunter will take 10 damage to remove that 5-5. Once from you hitting him, and once from it hitting like your 5-5. And that's if they can do anything to remove it without using the 3-2 anyway. So your calculus is very, very different when you're dealing with a Demon Hunter on whether to go face or trade than it is when you're dealing with another class. That's not to say never trade. I actually trade quite a lot against Demon Hunters. But when I trade, it's usually to protect a minion, or because I'm behind already and I really don't want the Demon Hunter to go face, because then I would die. So those are the times in which you would trade, and those are the times you would trade with any class. But just in a neutral situation, which still happens, I think, on like a quarter to a third of my decision making of whether to trade or go face, you just go face, because the alternatives are very rarely going to screw you over compared to another class. And that's the quote-unquote downside of the Demon Hunter hero power. Not much of a downside. But you got to take advantage of it. These are not things that it's like, oh, I can do this and gain an advantage. No. You can do this and make the Demon Hunter's hero power actually honest. Like, if you don't do stuff like this, you're giving the Demon Hunter this, like, ridiculous, like, 4-card advantage and, like, 10 tempo, like, advantage over the course of the early game. And you're not gonna win if you do that. So, these are just things that you have to do, against Demon Hunters.
Cool.
Alright. So I think that's a decent rundown of how to beat demon hunters. It's not going to work every time, even if you do everything I said and have a decent deck. Demon hunters are very RNG. It's really not going to work super often compared to how you think strategies are supposed to work if you're demon hunter versus demon hunter, because then you're adding double layers of RNG on top of stuff. But that's how you're supposed to play against demon hunters. And if you consistently do that, and you consistently refine your like internal expectations game of what the demon hunter can do, and also your expectations game of like what reads you have on the demon hunter or what cards they definitely don't have, then you'll just get better and better against defeating demon hunters.
All
right. Anything else you want to add about demon hunters, or
No, not really. Here's the thing. I think a lot of it is people still have memories of or kind of PTSD of demon hunters during the first day when they came out, and I think people still have this idea that demon hunters are supremely OP. All demon hunters are right now is the best class in the meta. That's it.
yeah,
Every meta has a best class. Demon hunters are the best class. And what I mean is that's all they are. It just means like there's nothing unusual about this meta that can be attributed to demon hunters in its present state. In fact, demon hunters play probably more fair. I know you guys don't think of like demon hunters as fair because I think a lot of you will be like, oh, they're so OP. They play kind of the most fair out of a lot of classes. Like, you know what's the unfair class? It would be like priest, right? Because priests are
freaking
dumb.
priest.
They do a lot of dumb things. If you actually don't want as much dumb things, if we define dumb things as defined by kind of the ridiculous swing potential, then Demon Hunter is actually a very fair class. And I think a lot of people misconstrue or they misplace their frustration onto Demon Hunters when really their frustration is just the overall meta that it has become. And I think a lot of people still wrongfully attribute way too much of blame to demon hunters right now when it's really just like, well, it's the twin tyrants, it's all of the huge taunts, it's all of the whether it's neutral or class swing cards and etc. And then because they kind of don't like the meta in its current state, they're just like, oh, I remember demon hunters were like the scourge and they're still strong, and like they were introduced and the meta is really bad and I'm frustrated. It's demon hunters. No, demon hunters are really not the issue right now. In fact, if everyone played more like a demon hunter play style, I'm not saying like sort of individual cards aren't great, like Coilfang Warlord is stupid, but if more people play, or like if more classes played like the demon hunter played, you would actually enjoy the meta a lot more.
Yeah.
So it's really like demon hunters are really not the issue anymore, but I see still on like Arena HS, I think a lot of people who play Arena still wrongfully attribute the problems of this meta, emphasis on the meta, to demon hunters, in which in its current state is really not problematic. And if anything, you should be pushing for more classes to hopefully be micro adjusted for future expansions to give them cards to play more like the demon hunter is right now, as opposed to priests, as opposed to your high rolled kind of like mages and whatnot. Because if you high roll a priest or high roll a mage as opposed to a high roll demon hunter, that demon hunter still plays like pretty honestly. It just has like pretty insane tempo, which is nothing that we haven't seen before from like paladins, right? Or just like rogues, just really good tempo, aggressive kind of style. They can close out games. It feels frustrating, but at the same time, it's nothing compared to those mages and those priests, which honestly just cheat the game in a way that is much unhealthier.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that people get this distinction right now, because once again, here's the thing: people just I think, oh god, how can I say this in the right way? I think the arena community does a really poor job of complaining about the right thing. Like,
uh,
just over and over
well,
and
they can't
over
complain
again.
against Twin Tyrants anymore because the offering rates have dropped to the point where, like, when it comes out, it's really annoying still, but it's not like you're not being destroyed by a Twin Tyrant every game the way you used to be, right? It's no longer who plays their
Sure.
Twin
Yeah.
Tyrant first because now there's a
Yeah.
lot of cars that are almost as bad or like whatever, and they're offered a lot, and you see a Demon Hunter almost every game. So you're complaining about that because that's powerful, and you're seeing that a lot, and you know the meta is not great. So you're like conflating the
The
issues.
meta isn't great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the meta is
it's definitely
it's
not
not great. What I like about the meta though is that there's been one round of quote unquote micro adjust, but only for one class and it was done by hand. Blizzard early next week, so this coming week, maybe even by the time you listen to this podcast, is doing a round of patches. It's going to one, nerf the Demon Hunter even more for constructive purposes. Two, buff Libram of Justice because the best paladin card in rated by our tier list that definitely needs a buff, but for constructive purposes, that card's gonna be insane, but not like what we. I think I talked about this before. If you looked at our previews, for the priests, when the priests, a lot of the priest cards got lowered by 1 mana. If you have a reactive card and you lower it by 1 mana, it's very different than if you had a curve card and you lowered it by 1 mana. So Libram of
yeah.
Justice, that's the one that equality is single-sided on your opponent's side and then equips a Light's Justice. That's going down from like 6 to 5 mana, I think. And it's already a 186 on our tier list, so it's gonna be like near a 200, but it's not gonna be like extremely over 200. I don't even think it's gonna hit a 200, even though it's losing an entire mana, just because like you're usually not playing it on turn 5 to hard remove their 5 drop that they happen to do. Anyway, so with those changes, one, they're going to help a little because they are nerfing Demon Hunters in those. If you're wondering about the nerfs for Demon Hunters, Gladebound Adept is moving down in attack, which is not the biggest deal. But Battle Fiend is like being taken off the freaking map. It's instead of a 2/2, it's a 1/2 now. So
Yeah, it's pretty much over for Battlefield.
yeah, it's going to be below a 100.
That's too much stats to lose, and by too much stats I mean one or one drop.
Yeah.
But no, it goes from it like possibly the best like one drop ever printed, right?
Mhm.
To just pretty trash.
Yeah.
Like, just pretty trash. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's gonna hurt somewhat, but the micro adjusts, the real micro adjusts that are automated, that Blizzard like takes forever to do for whatever reason, every expansion, they may be coming next week as well. And whenever those hit, then you're going to see the meta actually stabilize some. And I think I've been clear about this since I was expecting the standard meta to hit the arena in February. I was always curious how they were going to handle the standard arena whenever they brought it back, because Ear of the Dragon is so freaking toxic. Like, Merps is talking about like priests and mages, and yes, priests are ridiculous, doing ridiculous stuff. Mages do some ridiculous stuff, less ridiculous stuff. Shamans do a lot of ridiculous stuff. But really, what does ridiculous stuff is just neutral cards, like
Yeah.
and legendaries. Like, this is what some guy did to me once. Literally, this happened. I had him down to 1 health. I was like a demon hunter, and he had no way to kill me whatsoever. And he was like out of heals, out of whatever. It was just basically like kind of like has like 2 cards in his hands and like top decking. I knew he didn't have any heals or taunts or anything. Not that it matters. I had like 3 cards left and like I basically had the board compared to him. He plays a lackey, which discovers Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. This is all the same turn. He just had a lackey that he hadn't played before. Lackey to discover Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. And then he used Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, and one of the dragons he got is the dragon that healed everybody to full health. And the other one is, I don't know, some gigantic dragon too. And I lost immediately. Just I went from having a 99.99% chance of winning the game to having a literal 0% chance of winning the game. Because I'm a demon hunter. I was like honest, quote unquote, right? Like, and I got my honest win with my high power cards, but I can't swing back like that. And neither could this, I think it was a paladin or something. I don't know. Neither could whoever the hell I was facing, right? Their class can't swing that hard either. But what can swing that hard? Neutral cards. Neutral cards can swing that hard. Cards that generate lackeys can swing that card. Cards that generate random stuff. And that's what this meta is. It's just not just high power, but high power and high swing, and a lot of it is in neutral. That could have been a warrior. That could have been a hunter. That could have been anybody that I was facing. I was just going to lose. And that happens so often over the course of a run. And that is not something Blizzard can control without doing something like buckets or just banning a lot of cards. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't think they're going to do that. So considering that that is the base that we actually entered into AOO, Ashes of Outlands with, and we're adding Demon Hunter, this new class that Blizzard has like no arena data for and has no idea what to do with it, and it's just like kind of figuring it out as it goes. I feel like after the next patch, this meta, the arena meta, may become one of the like above average metas. Like I don't think it's going to be a great meta, but I think there's definitely a decent possibility that it will be an above average meta of like slow card advantage kind of games. And you guys know that's not usually the meta I favor, but there's skill involved in managing your cards and your resources. Tempo's not useless. I see a thread on Arena HS that's like, is Tempo just totally worthless in this meta? And the answer is no. It's just worth less. Like what you're used to Tempo being worth, it's not worth that much anymore. Because it's standard and because swings are harder. The more the swing, the less the tempo matters. But tempo gets you card advantage because when you're on the board, you're doing stuff. Tempo also forces your opponent to use their big bomb. Like their swing cards, if you have the board and your opponent wipes away your tempo, you may be like, oh, tempo was so useless. No, you've just won opponents using their big bomb that should have 3-for-1 you and instead just wiped out the card advantage you've gained naturally on the board. So you've effectively gained a 3-for-1 from your tempo plays in the early game. Which again, you get a couple 3-for-1s every single game now, but that still matters. If we're tracking who wins more 3-for-1s and that's who ultimately wins the game, and normally it takes like 3-for-1s to win the game, well, your tempo plays was worth 1 of your 3 that it takes to win the game. That's hardly not important at all. That's hardly worthless. That's 1/3 of your victory you owe to tempo. What you can't do is totally ignore card advantage, unless you just happen to have that deck, right? And sometimes Blizzard doesn't give you a choice because they just offer you certain cards. But if you the best decks right now really have a curve, have tempo, and also have late game. And that's also why people hate Demon Hunters so much, because Demon Hunters manage to do that often. They have tempo because of their hero power and a lot of really good early game cards. They have card advantage because a lot of the really good early game cards just like draw you more cards. Or are otherwise like decent in card advantage and they shouldn't be. And you end up with a deck that is like not the best for card advantage, but decent. It'll keep up for most of the game with card advantage of any other class, and then it like definitely has the tempo. So tempo is definitely not like dead or worthless. It's just you've never seen it be worth less than the current meta.
Yeah. Agreed.
What else? Anything else? Albatross is getting nerfed early next week too.
Yeah, they basically ran through all of the nerfs that you are going to see going into next week. In terms of specific cards, they're also going to micro adjust, hopefully. But yeah, so the cards that you are going to see changed that really make a difference. Bad Luck Albatross is going to cost 4 mana, which means it's going to suck now. Frenzied Fellwing is turning from a 3/3 to a 3/2.
It already was not good.
It was fine. It was fine-ish, but in terms of swings, it's just not as good of a swing, right? It's just not as good of a swing as you should expect in this meta. And when you can't deal any damage, it just really, really sucks.
Yeah, like
so it was
3/3
fine,
swing on the board is like really not that much of a swing these days, and when you can't do whatever it is in constructed that you can do to consistently get it out, like it's always been whatever. I don't know what we rate it, but it was definitely below Yeti.
And then Gladebound Adept is going from a 7-4 in stats to a 6-4 in stats. Doesn't matter that much, just because a lot of times you're just using it for, well, the initial 4 damage is very important. The stats are good, but the stats are delayed, so it's not as important. And then, of course, we have the Librum of Justice and Battle Fiend changes, probably 2 of the more impactful changes. That's, that's pretty much it. I didn't mention a couple of other changes that really, really do not matter.
Yeah, legendary stuff.
Yeah. And then, of course, for Battlegrounds, Millhouse is getting the nerf. Millhouse is staying the same, except now his tiers are going to be more expensive by 1, which means that if you just map it out, he can no longer tier up on turn 2, which is your 4 gold turn, because now it costs 5 unless
That's
you sell
ridiculous.
one item. Yeah, I think so. Here is the thing with Millhouse. It definitely needed to be changed. I think it is very healthy for the game that he is getting changed. And I've read all sorts of responses in terms of people thinking that he is completely dead versus, for example, like Crip saying he thinks that Millhouse is still potentially the best hero in the game.
No way.
I think
no way. There's no way he's still tier 1.
I think where Millhouse is going to end up is quite a good sort of like, if we're talking about, like the top 5 heroes at any given moment being in like the S tier, I think he'll be like high A tier ish or solid A tier. I think he'll still be good. I don't think he'll be amazing. He'll be where kind of like Deathwing is right now, potentially a little bit worse. I would say around the same.
Really?
Yeah. Mostly just
doing
because,
okay right now. Like he's not great, but he's okay.
I think he's good. I think he's quite good.
Like win rate wise, Deathwing's number 5 out of on HS replay out of top 20%, MMR range 7,000 and above.
Right. I mean, I'm always trying to have like my internal list is a little bit different than that, because there's a huge difference between like 11K and what was it, 6.5K and above,
6.8K
right?
and above,
6.8K. So we'll just say 7K and above, right? But
Yeah.
there is still a huge difference between, it's like 7K, like 7/8K, which I'm guessing is going to be most of the info they're pulling from, and 11K. But I think Millhouse is going to be fine, just because you can still buy on, you can still buy 2 units on 4 gold. So you have this early game advantage. He essentially turns into.
But then you can't do anything on turn 3. You have to upgrade, and then like maybe upgrade one of your like 1 mana stuff if you manage to get a token, especially.
But you're still winning at that stage, and you can still like take a hit. You can buy a lot of things. I think he'll still be okay because his early game tempo is still decent. And what happens a lot of time, it's like if you look at the leveling scheme for Millhouse, what happens a lot of times is you are able to kind of level, and then sell something and then buy something better. He just doesn't get that upgrade anymore. But that early game tempo matters a ton. Like it matters so much. And I see him as just sort of like, it's different, but he's like a better Syndragosa now. Like a much better Syndragosa. Syndragosa also does a thing where Syndragosa perhaps like tiers up in like the same speed as other people, but Syndragosa relies on like kind of crummy tier 1 units and bad tier 2 units for a while, right? So I see the same thing.
But they're not actually crummy tier 1 units or bad tier 2 units. They're better because they've been buffed. Whereas
no, they've been buffed. So Millhouse is more,
buffed.
while Syndragosa has buffed ones, right? But it's similar in that tier 1 units and low tier 2 units, like they don't really have a role in any end game, right? So it is similar in the way that like you can have buff tier 1 units, or you could just have more tier 1 units. It's kind of the same thing. It's
Yeah,
like
but
that
that's
early game
only
sort of
in
like
the very
tempo.
early game, right? Like
Yeah.
once you get to tier 3, it's already over for Millhouse because Millhouse already has like on the turn that you upgrade to tier 3, which is the turn that you have 7 mana, you have fills your board. You have 7 minions that are either tier 1 or tier 2, and you can't roll in that entire time. So it's the best units that you get offered each turn without the ability to roll. And from the next turn on, you can only replace those units with tier 3 units. Whereas you take someone like Syndragosa, and then they still have spaces, they can still just add to the board. So it's like a really crappy trade off for Millhouse, except for like 1 or 2 turns. Like, I think it's just those 1 or 2 turns that Millhouse has an advantage. So Millhouse has stability on turn. I mean, not stability. Frankly, Millhouse is like will destroy everyone on turn 2 because he's staying on turn 2, and then has a stable turn 3 that matches what most classes are doing on turn 3. And then on turn 4, Millhouse is going to outpace what all the other classes are doing. And on turn 5, Millhouse is going to maintain that tempo and be a little better than what other classes are doing. And then from 6 onwards, Millhouse is just going to be weaker.
From 6 onwards, he can still like from 6 onwards. I mean, he can still use sort of his cheaper or his like superior kind of like econ, right? His superior buying power, in order to keep up and do whatever. So that's the thing. It's like you sort of laid out the first 5 turns and how he has an advantage there. That's really good. That's like really, really good. And yeah, it costs more for him to upgrade. But then, of course, with his superior buying power, he can pick up pairs, right? I think you have to play Millhouse a bit differently after the nerf. Just value pairs a little bit more because right now with Millhouse, you actually don't really go for
Yeah, I
pairs.
was
You just
about
go
to
for
say,
pure
Millhouse
power.
sucks with pairs. You can't roll. Your chances of hitting triples are
No, no,
way lower than
well,
everyone else's.
so you can go the opposite way in terms of playing Millhouse. It's not about because what you do is you just buy. You buy and you like don't necessarily have to sell them, so you give yourself a lot of chances to hit it. What you're thinking is like, oh, you don't roll a lot. Yeah, sure, but if you just buy up a lot of things, you don't need a lot of rolls in order to hit, right? You either hit your triples by rolling a lot or just by having a lot of things, such that every single time that the tavern refreshes after a battle or you do roll, your chances are really high, right? So you
I
you,
don't
you
think they're
counteract it
that
like
high. I
that.
don't think the numbers work like that. Like when you don't get to roll, because like what are you doing as Millhouse? You're still going to upgrade to tier 4 at a certain point. Like you're not
Oh
skipping
yeah, of
your
course.
upgrade to tier 4, so you're really only able to buy like one more thing, at most 2 more things, but likely one more thing than other people per turn, and that's not going to help your chances at tripling compared to rolling. Like rolling lets you view like 5 more things. Like it's not even comparable.
You
You're
get to buy quite a lot more. Like
you get
each
to buy
minion
one
that you
more
get is
per
only
turn.
one. It only costs 1 gold. For everyone else, it costs 2 gold. That's like insane.
Right, but when you buy a pair, you have to hold it. Like
Mhm.
assuming it's not what, so it costs 2 gold for now.
Yeah, well, no, I'm obviously not saying you keep every single thing. You give yourself like chances. With like tier 1 units, tier 2 units, you hold ones that matter,
Yeah,
right?
but I'm
Like
saying each time you
Umbach,
hold, it takes
Spawn,
2.
etc.
Like math it out. Let's say you have like
Hmm.
I don't know, the 9 mana turn, right? Where you're well, okay. So on the 9 mana turn where you're upgrading one more, you're in the same position as anyone else, right? They upgrade their upgrade costs are 1 lower than you, but it costs them 3 mana to get something. Your upgrade costs are 1 higher, but it costs you 2 mana to get something. So on 7 mana and 9 mana, you're in the same position as everyone else. You get to buy nothing more. On that one turn, on 8 mana, right? You get to buy 4 things, and someone else gets to buy like 2. Someone else probably gets 2 with some rolling to get like the right 2 things, or maybe 3 things if they get like really lucky. So other people are on 2 to 3. You're on like 4 to 5, maybe 6. So you're getting like, I guess 2 more. But no, but then you have to roll. You're not going to buy all of that. So you have to subtract 2 for the roll. So no, you're getting like 5. at best. You're getting 4 to 5, whereas other people are getting 2 to 3. Okay, so it is 2. So you get about 2 more. Like if you're in a high buying situation, you get 2 more to purchase, whereas other people get something like 10 more views. That doesn't even out. Like when even if you're just purely going for trips, that doesn't even out.
That's significant. That's a lot. Like 2 more minions that you're able to buy, whether it is buffs or triple potential or
Yeah.
just like
Like
good
think about like
units.
half the time you're going to like be buying the good trips anyway. So only around like half the trips are the ones that you're not going to be buying to go after that you can now, like because you don't want to roll with Millhouse. So you're not the math is really not going to work out there for you to have a better chance of getting trips than other classes. Like other classes have better chances of getting trips. Until like the very end game. Like I feel like once Millhouse is on like on tier 6, maybe that's the case. But even at like 10 mana, Millhouse is not going to have more chances of getting trips than your average hero in Battlegrounds. Like that's pretty simple math.
I think just because of the way that the game is right now, the fact that Millhouse gets that, like, I don't think you're giving enough credit to that like insane early game
Yeah,
advantage.
okay. I'm not talking about the early game
Yeah.
advantages or whatever. I'm saying that you can't go for trips. Like you can't go for trips any more than at least the neutral player. I feel like you have to go for trips. Well, not necessarily less. You just may not have better options, but like your chances for hitting a trips are not higher than a normal class. Like
So
that's not a good mid game strategy. I mean, maybe I'm not saying that's not Millhouse's best mid game strategy, but if that is Millhouse's best mid game strategy, that is a weakness, not a strength. It's just best relative to his other strategies because he's sucking at this period.
so you're not just gonna like hold everything and then just sort of like settle in as well. It's like you give yourself more chances with every single sort of time, and then you ditch whenever you have to ditch
Yeah.
because there's some
I'm
better stuff on
anticipating all
there.
of that. Like that's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
going into the math, and it's just not a very like hard math problem. Like during like I'm looking at manas from like 8, 9, 10, and then 10, 10, like around that period. You like I'm not saying don't do it again because if comparatively Millhouse's other strategy, which is to not buy the triples, is worse, and I think it probably is worse. I don't disagree with your like advice that you should be buying stuff to go for trips, but I think that just shows how weak Millhouse is.
All
Not
right. So
like
where
during
do
those
you think
turns.
it's gonna turn out?
Millhouse, I think Millhouse will be around where the great Akazamarak is, or maybe even Patchwork in that
Uh,
zone. Like I'm looking at the HS replay
well, wait.
numbers.
That's quite different.
Well, they're only 5 apart on HS replay numbers. So this zone is right below Elise. It is the great Akasar Marak, Malagos, Alexstrasza, Rat King, Patchwork. Millie's after that. Curators after that. AFKs after that. Like I think that'll be around the zone that he settles in. Like it won't be in like the like Yogg zone.
Okay. So we're basically saying like if you were to look at HS replay stats, that's where he would settle into. Okay. Because that uh I
Well,
can
you're
accept.
asking for tiers, right? Like I'm saying, even
Exactly.
at the
Yeah.
highest level, that's where he'll settle at, like roughly in like the
Yeah.
tiers.
Well,
But the composition of what makes up that tier may be different. But he'll basically be below average, is my point. Average being 4.5 wins. Like this
sure,
is the
sure,
tier that's like right below average. Like still
sure.
definitely playable, but like right below average. And I would be very surprised if he is at all above average, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's down where like I don't know, like Bartendotron is. Like I wouldn't predict that, but I think he's more likely to be where Bartendotron is than he's likely to be where Yogg is.
Yeah.
That's
And
my
of
prediction.
course, with everyone listening, this is our predictions in terms of nothing else changes,
Yeah,
only
yeah,
Millhouse changes, of course.
yeah,
Because honestly, like obviously, if they change units as well, and
yeah.
if they change compositions, then
Mm-hmm.
everything is out the window. But I think we can all agree that this has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
It's certainly dampened my enthusiasm for BGs, as well as the fact that there's literally not that much reason to be grinding after a certain point, or the grind is way too long. Like I calculated in my mind kind of the time I would need, even if I were the best player. Like even if I were the best player that we can see, right? Essentially, because like for example, there was two players on the top of the leaderboards. Can't see them. No one has any idea how they got there. Essentially, I think the best player or the highest player on the leaderboards that stream are like Victor and Wobbleweezy. I think they're like the top players that are actually streaming. And they're well, Victor is a great example of someone who is supremely good at the game. His Smurf account is still, or like I think his Smurf account has played almost 3 times as much games as my main account, and the highest he got was
How many hours
only.
are on your main account? Someone in chat asked me this last time I played, so I actually checked my stats, and I was like a little over 200 hours
I'm like a
on
little over
Battlegrounds.
300, I
Okay.
think.
Yeah, and like
Yeah,
I'm
I'm like,
still like every time I finish like a 2 hour session of Battlegrounds, I'm always like I know a lot of areas where I could have done better. Like right now, there's at least a quarter of the turns every single run, at least a quarter of the turns where I don't have enough time to rearrange my minions, and at least half the turns, if not more, where I don't have enough time to scout. So like just as a baseline, I have so many areas I can improve on, and I'm almost 10k. I'm like 150, less than 150 away from 10k, and I've been like fluctuating around that level. But it's Battlegrounds, right? Like I may be in the same lobbies as everybody, but at least up until this point in my climb, it makes a huge difference. Like the 9.8k lobbies on average are much harder than the 9.3k lobbies, like noticeably so. And it's always struck me as crazy just how big the difference is in terms of your competition rise, just like in such a seemingly random game.
climb is quite hard. It's very very hard. People play optimally. People will punish you, and at so once you get past 10k, you literally just I mean you get into the same you pretty much get into the same lobbies, but especially after 10k, your main opponent is just the MMR system.
Yeah,
Like that is your biggest opponent because you don't face like better players at 11k than at 10k. The system is just not rigged, but it's definitely just tilted against you. You can't get fourths anymore. 3.5s, maybe you get positive win. So you got to get third, which is really hard if the game forces you to get third every single game because there's a huge gap between like fifth, sixth, and fourth, and then there's a huge gap between fourth and third.
yeah.
So the game is really saying like, all right, you got
But
to prove
I
yourself.
hate that I'm not there yet. Like I think around like at 9.85, getting 4.5, and I've actually done this. I've gotten 4.5 3 times in my last like 6 games. At around this MMR level, and I sometimes gain like a couple of MMR, I sometimes lose a couple of MMR, but it feels like it's a dead 0 point still, as it should be, as it's been, between 6k and wherever and 9.8k. So whenever it actually starts shifting, that shifts incentives. That makes it more rewarding to just have higher swing games if you get to keep the average the same. And it's like it's a huge, we'll say, it's an inelegant and meta aspect of the game that has nothing to do with the game itself that warps the entire meta. So that anyone above a certain MMR is playing a very different game. And not just because they're more skilled. You get the same players and you put them all at 4,000 and they would play a very different game than they play at like 12k, 13k. And it's
Yeah,
farther away from the game that everyone else is playing. Like, it's a horrible MMR system to encourage things like that.
yeah, it's like if you were playing at you're playing a game of poker. Everyone was playing in the same cash game at a same table, but people have different breaks.
Yeah.
It just messes the
Yeah,
game
no,
up.
and in designing a game, you would never do that because it's terrible design. But we know Blizzard and we know what they've said about Battlegrounds and about the rating system and about like what their original view is for Battlegrounds, which is what this rating system is based on, which is basically that this rating system is not meant to function at the top. Like,
No, it's not
so
meant to function. It actually just breaks down at the top,
yeah,
which we
so they're
see.
just like we're just like waiting for a better MMR system, like effectively. And
And they
until
had
then,
it and
the
they
top,
implemented it.
yeah. But then
But
I don't know why they haven't done a single MMR reset or like soft reset yet. It's been
it's
so many
pretty
months,
insane.
and we're
Yeah.
in beta. Like no one could even complain that much if you do a reset. They've
Yeah,
like
exactly.
released a whole new expansion, 2 whole new expansions since then. Like so many, 3 whole new expansions actually. It's been so many good breakpoints.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they could just do it at any given moment, and then people complain because they always complain about everything. But it's a beta, right?
Yeah.
You can just say it's a beta, and we're just doing like it, there's no
You
rewards for
expect
it
some
anyways.
wipes for betas, and like I think everybody expects a wipe to happen at the end of beta. Like every single person, no one expects their MMR to like stay the same through the end of beta. That would be a weird launch.
Yeah, they just haven't announced anything. What they need is to essentially implement that MMR system that they implemented for 2 days, which is more similar to the Overwatch
Yeah.
MMR system than the one they had here. And Overwatch, it's I mean, I'm sure you can find some fault in it, but their current MMR system is a lot better than the one that we have here. It's not constant inflation. Like people top out. It's like once you get past 4,000 in Overwatch, it's really hard to go up because you have to face similarly skilled people, and then uh, like it's more punishing,
Hmm.
but it doesn't give you this inflation, right?
Yeah.
If I stopped playing, and right now it's slowing down because at a certain point, like yikes, you are playing against the system, and the system will punish you for trying to climb. But like if you just look at the leaderboards, like the top 200 players, I think the minimum to get on there is like 10.7, almost 10.8 now. It's like 10.8, which is pretty crazy. Like it's slowly going to be that you need 11K just to be in the top 200 in NA,
Hmm. That's
which
when I
is
get into 10K.
yeah, that's exactly when you get into 10K.
Hmm.
But it's made it such that you look at that, and when I look at like, oh, do I try to make a push to get into the top 20? It's not about like I don't question kind of like, oh man, I don't think I have the skills or anything. I'm just like, it's just not worth it. It's really just the grind necessary. And all we had to do is look at Victor, how much he's played, um, and where he topped off. He managed to get into like the top 10 on his Smurf after playing an insane amount of hours, and that's him being as skilled as he is. If you are that skilled, you should not take 7, 8, 900 hours like
Yeah.
Victor did to get to where he, quote, should be. And Overwatch doesn't do that. 10 placement games, which take, I don't know, like 5, 6 hours or so, 5, 6 hours, it'll place you probably in like high masters, if not grandmasters. Like, let's say you are a top grandmasters player, it'll place you in like high masters, if not low grandmasters. And that's after like 5, 6 hours. And if you play like 5, 6 more hours, your Smurf account is not too far off from where your main account is going to be,
Hmm.
um, in terms of
Yeah.
score. Now,
I mean, we talked
that
about all
yeah,
this in the last
yeah.
Lightforge and all that. I don't want to like belabor, the point.
Yeah,
But
sure.
it's an MMR system. Blizzard knows it's broken. Blizzard knows how to fix it roughly, and they're just not. They haven't applied it yet.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know when it's gonna happen, but I'm also looking forward to it. I think it'll give more incentive because right now I'm just playing to like improve myself in the game. Like the MMR doesn't really have too much meaning to me because I know
There's
what it's
literally no
like
reward.
up like higher on the MMR scale. Like it just makes the game like if anything really like it makes you worse at the game because it's giving you weird incentives. It's making you better at a different game. You know?
Yeah.
And it's not like, and I don't also know, like right now I'm in so many lobbies with the top players already that I feel like I've gotten to the right lobbies at least. So I don't feel like I'll get significantly better lobbies if I like go up another 1K
You
in
definitely
MMR.
will. Yeah. No, the lobbies are.
Yeah, so I'm facing the right people. What upsets me is that some of those people are having the weird skewed incentives. So it's like imagine if you're in a lobby and 3 of the people have incentives to high roll because if they get 4th they lose MMR, and then 5 of the people don't. They're under normal incentives. Well, then those 3 are going to be like 7th, 8th, or 1st. You know, and the rest of them are the rest of us are going to get like carried up on average, and that's like not really fair. Like it's good for me, it's good for like everybody in terms of climbing, but it's weird to put people in the game with different incentives, and all the people want to do is rise in MMR. So they all have the same big incentives, but Blizzard's applying them in different ways, and that creates a skewed game where no one's getting the correct lobby. So I think the actual correct lobbies that have the correct incentives for a correct game of Battlegrounds, you have to not be able to be in a lobby with any of the top players, with anybody over like I don't know 10.5 k MMR or something like that.
Yeah,
So
and this is
I
the
think
problem you
that's
see with.
like 8k MMR maybe. I think you'll definitely avoid those lobbies. Even at low 9k MMRs, I think I get into some of those lobbies. So maybe like 9k, maybe 8.5k.
Yeah. Well, this is the problem with Overwatch, right? It's like when the best players queue up, sometimes it takes 5 minutes for them to
Yeah.
find a game.
Yeah.
And Blizzard doesn't want that with Battlegrounds. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. There's just like different audiences, different expectations. With something like Overwatch, you're just like, okay, well, we're okay with you trying to get it right. With Battlegrounds, like, put me in a game.
Yeah. So. All right. Anything else, or are we wrapping up this Lightforge?
Nah, that's it. We've rambled on
We
long enough.
rambled on. Any question from the goat?
Nope.
No question from the
let's just say
goat.
that was it. Let's just say that was it.
Okay. All right. We'll see you guys out here till next week, where we'll have probably. Well, we'll analyze the arena meta, and then we'll talk probably more about Battlegrounds, because there will be a new Battlegrounds meta without Millhouse in the picture. So until next week, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merp. See you guys.